Let me give you a very specific example of what happens when realistic goes wrong for amp modeling. The first step, when I wanted to really work this into what I played at church, was to recreate my amp tones on this thing. It's kind of laborious. I'm sitting there A/B testing, I'm turning a knob a little bit, I'm listening to the Stomp, I'm listening to the Dream pedal, and I'm just trying to get them as close as possible. I'm trying to get the Dream pedal to approach what I'm working with in the Stomp through an iterative process. To isolate the amp model per se, I disabled the speaker emulation in the UA Dream pedal, and we just ran it back to the Stomp through the cab or the IR or whatever I was using there. I spent hours dialing this in, and I nailed it. It was great. I loved it. I did like it better than what I had in the HX Stomp. It was different. Let's say it was an improvement. So the next step was to figure out which of the universal audio speaker emulations worked best with my new settings. None of them worked. As soon as I switched from the HELIX cab to the universal audio speaker emulation, everything started sounding like wet farts. I was horrified and greatly discouraged. I wanted to give up. I actually did. I set this aside for a while and had to come back to it a month or two later because it was just really demoralizing. There's a reason why it took me months to figure out how to work this pedal in. I learned a valuable lesson that day on the difference between an impulse response and a real speaker emulation. The Line 6 cab models, they're basically impulse responses. They're just an EQ curve. They do the same thing to the signal regardless of how much signal is coming in and what frequency bands those signals are. Whereas the Dream 65, warts and all, they gave you a real deal cabinet and speaker emulation. Well, guess what? Speakers don't have infinite clean headroom, do they? What happens when you overdrive a speaker and it distorts? It sounds like farts. Not good farts, wet farts. That's what it sounds like. I had pushed the tone stack and the gain stages in this pedal so far past the clean headroom of the speakers that it was utterly useless. And my beautiful tone, unless I stuck with the HELIX cabs, that was what I was going to do at first. But before giving up, I did try to do the process again, matching that tone with the headroom limitation in place so that I did not exceed it. I don't want to flub out the digital speakers. That's not a sound that I like. I actually was able to get my tone on this thing with the speaker emulation in place. I had to redo that iterative process, but it wasn't quite the same. I was not able to get all of that sparkle that I had found when I didn't have to worry about clean headroom of a digital speaker. There just was no way of getting this amp model to do what I wanted it to do without overdriving the speaker and distorting it. Sometimes in the amp modeling space, we're actually pushing the models of the amps way further than the actual amps could have gone. For instance, in the HELIX products, there's a Princess amp model. It's based off of Fender Princeton. It's very well beloved by the modeling community, especially the worship guys, and I love it. And guess what? What we do with that thing, you would never be able to get a Princeton to do that. It's got a single 10-inch speaker. It would totally flub out on you. It would probably, that amp would sound like dry farts, not wet farts. It would be a good tone. It would be like a rock tone or a blues tone. It wouldn't be something we would do at church though. But because we don't have to worry about the clean headroom of the speaker, we take that Princess amp, we crank it, we get breakup out of it that it would be very difficult to get out of a real Princeton. It's kind of awesome. And I like that I can really treat the Princess amp model as its own thing, and I'm not bound by the limitations of the Princeton. We can make huge sounds with that thing, and it doesn't get gritty. When we do that, it's nothing like a real Princeton. We don't care, that's okay, because we're not trying to make it sound like a real Princeton. We're trying to make it sound the way we want it to sound. Is it a problem if it sounds better than a real Princeton for what we're doing? It reminds me of an interview with David Bowie about music in the 70s and how they had these synthesizers for the first time. And they were like the size of a room, like Stevie Wonder's synthesizer. He had to have an engineer with him just to do patch cables everywhere. And what David Bowie said was the engineers who created these things, they thought of all these sounds that they assumed would be useful to musicians. But the sounds that engineers think are useful to musicians aren't always the sounds that musicians find useful. So they would read the instructions on the right way to put the wires, and they would try to find all the wrong ways to put the wires to get sounds that the thing was never supposed to make. So it's just another generation of that, really. Is it better to be able to make your amp sound like wet farts? It's more real if you can. When I first started helping with audio for a church, there was a guy who was like the guy who knew everything, and he was the staff audio video person. Apparently the microphones we had were so crystal clear that it really revealed how not awesome the singing was. And so he would meet singers and they would complain, I don't like the way my voice sounds in this mic. Can I just use an SM58? He's sitting there thinking, oh, well, the problem is your voice doesn't sound good and this is revealing that. Who cares? Use the SM58 if it sounds better. If it's serving the people better to use the mic that's less clear, yeah, do that. It's fine. When all was said and done, 5 out of the 6 speaker emulations were not usable to me. I can't use them for any useful sound for church. Not because they were too bad, but because they were too good or too realistic, which is kind of rough.